Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Charts with Dan. And this is just one of those weekends where we have not only a big box office hit in Deadpool and Wolverine, but a box office hit that broke a slew of records. So we have a lot of charts to get into, and let's not waste any time because this is going to be a long episode. And let's jump right into the weekend top 10. At number one was Deadpool and Wolverine. We knew that it was going to be a big hit, but it exceeded most people's even highest expectations. The estimate is $205 million. I've seen reporting that suggests that once the final number comes out later today, we could be looking at something between $210 and $215 million. So I'll keep an eye on that. And if there's anything that needs to be updated after this week's show, I will do that next week. So a massive debut at Deadpool and Wolverine that we will be jumping into extensively in just a few minutes. In second place was Twisters with $35.3 million. It dropped 56.6% from last weekend. And honestly, that was to be expected. I mentioned on last week's show it was losing all of its premium format theaters. The big thing to watch on this one is going to be next weekend. If it takes a softer drop, then I think that's a good indication it should have pretty good legs throughout the month of August. If we see another big drop, then it may be that the movie was a bit more front-loaded than people thought. We'll just have to wait and see on that. However, its domestic box office total is now over $150 million. In third place was Despicable Me 4 in its fourth week of release with another $14.2 million. Its total is now approaching $300 million domestically. Inside Out 2 drops to number 4 with $8.3 million in week number 7. Its domestic total is now over $600 million. And Longlegs in week number 3 has another pretty soft drop for a horror film, 43.5%. It makes $6.7 million in its fifth weekend. Its domestic total is now over $50 million. And just a couple notes on some of these top 5 movies because we're really going to have to take a deep dive on Deadpool and Wolverine. First of all, Despicable Me is now the 6th highest grossing film in Illumination's history. Domestically, it's got another $46 million or so if it wants to get into that top 5 where Minions currently is. In any other week, this would be a much bigger story, but Inside Out 2 has now passed Incredibles 2 to become the highest grossing animated film of all time domestically at $613.4 million. That also, by default, makes it Pixar's highest grossing film of all time domestically as a company. And when we look at Pixar adjusted for inflation, Inside Out 2 has now passed Toy Story 3 for number 4 all-time adjusted. It now trails only Incredibles 2, Finding Nemo, and Finding Dory. It looks very likely to pass Finding Dory. Then we'll see if it's got enough gas in the tank to hit Finding Nemo. However, it will not pass Incredibles 2 if you adjust for inflation. And then finally, for Longlegs, it is now officially the highest grossing release in Neon's history. It has passed Parasite at $58.6 million. It's now about $5 million across that mark. So really the biggest success in the company's history, short history, but hopefully very long history, as Longlegs is a mainstream breakout for them. Turning to the rest of the top 10, A Quiet Place Day 1 comes in 6th place with a $3 million weekend number 5 gross. Its domestic total is now right around $135 million. Bad Boys Ride or Die spends an 8th week in the top 10. It made $1.2 million for a domestic total at $191.7 million. The Fabulous Four, playing in just over 1,000 theaters, comes in 8th place with just over $1 million for the weekend. Fly Me to the Moon continues to plummet to earth. It lost a lot of its theaters in weekend number 3 and dropped 77.3% for a $750,000 weekend total. Its domestic total now just over $19 million. And then in 10th place is a film from India called Rayan, which made $453,000 in limited release. This is a Tamil language crime/action/musical film from director Dhanush with music from A.R. Rahman. All right, so there are so many different ways to approach what happened with Deadpool and Wolverine this past weekend. So we're going to start small and then just get progressively bigger, which I guess is a double entendre that Deadpool himself would like. Let's start, first of all, with looking at the biggest 3-day opening weekends of the year, and Deadpool and Wolverine displaces Inside Out 2. Inside Out 2 did have the biggest opening weekend of 2024. It's now at number 2. Deadpool and Wolverine is at number 1. Also, the first $200+ million opening of the year. Inside Out 2 is in second place. Dune Part 2 falls to third. Twisters falls to fourth, and Godzilla Kong: The New Empire is now the 5th biggest opening weekend of the year. As far as R-rated opening weekends of the 2020s, Deadpool and Wolverine has it, and it's by over double the previous film, which was Oppenheimer at $82.4 million. John Wick Chapter 4 is now in third place, Bad Boys for Life is in fourth, and Bad Boys Ride or Die is in fifth. But 2020 is small potatoes when it comes to R-rated opening weekends, because Deadpool and Wolverine is also the highest opening ever for an R-rated film. It cleared that mark by over $70 million, depending on the final number. That could be over $80 million. The previous record holder was the first Deadpool movie back in 2016. Deadpool 2 is now the third highest opening ever for an R-rated film, so Deadpool obviously dominating this chart. It comes in fourth place at $123.4 million, and then Joker rounds out the top five at $96.2 million. If you were to adjust this for inflation, by the way, the top four would be the same, although in slightly different order, and then the fifth film would be The Matrix Reloaded, which was a Thursday opener, but was still enough for the top five if you adjust for inflation. As far as 3-day opening weekends of the 2020s domestically, Deadpool and Wolverine has the second best opening of the decade, behind only Spider-Man No Way Home back in 2021, which opened to $260.1 million. It pushes Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness down to number 3, Black Panther Wakanda Forever down to number 4, and Barbie down to number 5, keeping in mind those are all PG-13 rated films, whereas Deadpool and Wolverine was rated R. Deadpool and Wolverine also posted the best July opening weekend of all time. It goes down in the record books at number 1, pushing The Lion King back in 2019 down to number 2 at $191.7 million. I'm glad there's a movie that broke a Lion King record where we don't have to argue whether or not The Lion King is animated or not. Harry Potter's and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 gets pushed down to third place, Barbie goes down to fourth place, and The Dark Knight Rises is now the fifth best July opening weekend of all time. If you were to look at those numbers adjusted for inflation, Deadpool and Wolverine would be out of the top 5. It would be number 6, and it would still be only the 6th movie that has crossed the $200 million mark adjusted for inflation. With those inflation-adjusted numbers, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 is the top July opener at $236.3 million, followed by The Lion King at $235.6 million, The Dark Knight back in 2008 at $231.1 million, then The Dark Knight Rises in 2012 at $220.1 million, and Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest back in July of 2006 at $211.3 million rounds out the top 5. Deadpool and Wolverine was also one of the best 3-day opening weekends of all time. It comes in number 8, pushing Black Panther down to number 9, and The Lion King down to number 10. The Avengers and Jurassic World are numbers 6 and 7, and Avengers Endgame, Spider-Man No Way Home, Avengers Infinity War, Star Wars The Force Awakens, and Star Wars The Last Jedi make up the top 5, although if you adjust those numbers for inflation, Avengers Endgame is the number 1 opening at $438.8 million, followed by Star Wars The Force Awakens at $328.6 million, Avengers Infinity War at $322.4 million, then the original Avengers film back in 2012, followed by Star Wars The Last Jedi, Jurassic World, Spider-Man No Way Home, Avengers Age of Ultron, which Deadpool and Wolverine bumped off of the list if you don't adjust for inflation, is at number 8 at $253.5 million. Then we have Black Panther at number 9 and Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows at number 10. Looking at the X-Men franchise overall, Deadpool and Wolverine was by far the highest opener in franchise history. That's because Deadpool was the previous highest opener in franchise history. So now Deadpool takes up the top 3 spots on this list, followed by X-Men The Last Stand and X-Men Days of Future Past. If you were to adjust those opening numbers for inflation, Deadpool and Wolverine would still be number 1, with the first Deadpool film still in second place at $173.3 million. Then we have X-Men The Last Stand in third place at $160.1 million, Deadpool 2 in fourth place at $157 million, and then X2, X-Men United, going back 21 years, is the 5th highest opening film in the X-Men franchise adjusted for inflation at $146 million. Looking at the X-Men films by domestic gross, Deadpool and Wolverine is already the 7th highest grossing film in franchise history, just above X-Men Origins Wolverine, and it's just below X2, X-Men United. And when you look at that top 5, Logan, X-Men Days of Future Past, X-Men The Last Stand, Deadpool 2, and Deadpool, I don't see a reality where Deadpool and Wolverine does not make number 1 on that list, and in pretty short order. And if you look at the X-Men franchise adjusted for inflation, Deadpool and Wolverine is number 9, just ahead of X-Men First Class, and just behind X-Men Origins Wolverine. The original X-Men film is at number 7, Logan is at number 6, Days of Future Past is in 5th place, X-Men The Last Stand is in 4th, X2 X-Men United is in 3rd, and then Deadpool and Deadpool 2 are at numbers 1 and 2. Deadpool's adjusted gross is $475.2 million. Again, I think it's very likely, perhaps certain, that Deadpool and Wolverine hits that number 1 spot. Here's that big old chart we haven't seen in several months. This is the franchise tracker for the MCU. We can get one more movie before I have to radically think about how to chart this whole thing out, because we are pretty much at movie capacity in order to keep this thing legible. And you can see that Deadpool and Wolverine was the 5th highest opening weekend ever in the history of the MCU, behind only the Avengers, Avengers Infinity War, Spider-Man No Way Home, and Avengers Endgame. And you see those yellow boxes. Those yellow boxes are all of Marvel's releases, or at least the MCU's releases, post 2020. And you can also see, looking at that this was the second best opening of the decade for the MCU, behind only Spider-Man No Way Home. If we look at the MCU's opening weekends adjusted for inflation, Deadpool and Wolverine is at number 9 all time, just ahead of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and just behind Captain America Civil War. Iron Man 3, Black Panther, Avengers Age of Ultron, The Avengers, Spider-Man No Way Home, Avengers Infinity War, and Avengers Endgame are your top 7 films there. Looking at the overall domestic gross for the MCU, Deadpool and Wolverine is already at number 27. So it has in one weekend passed the entire domestic gross of Black Widow, the original Thor, Ant-Man, Captain America the First Avenger, Eternals, The Incredible Hulk, and the lowest grossing film in the history of the MCU domestically, The Marvels. And it's very possible, if the estimate is low, that it has already passed Thor the Dark World for number 26. And in very short order, meaning in the next few days, it'll be passing Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, Doctor Strange, and very soon after that, Captain America the Winter Soldier. And then next week on the show, we're really going to be tracking it as it goes through that list of movies in the lower $300 million range. So some upward mobility will be seen very quickly with Deadpool and Wolverine on this chart. Looking at the MCU franchise tracker by domestic gross adjusted for inflation, Deadpool and Wolverine has beaten the final adjusted domestic gross of Black Widow, The Incredible Hulk, Eternals, and The Marvels, and will very soon bypass Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, the original Ant-Man, and Captain America the First Avenger. So again, expect to see Deadpool and Wolverine much higher up this list next week. And then just to kind of look overall at some of the records that were set by Deadpool and Wolverine this past weekend, it was the highest opening of Ryan Reynolds' career, it was the highest opening of Hugh Jackman's career, it was the highest opening of director Sean Levy's career, it was also the number 1 X-Men franchise opening, the number 1 2024 domestic opening, the number 1 all-time R-rated opening, and the number 1 all-time July opening. It was the number 2 domestic opening of the 2020s, the number 5 domestic opening in MCU history, the number 8 all-time domestic opening. It was also the 34th consecutive MCU film to open at number 1 domestically. The MCU has never had a film that opened below number 1. It was the 4th R-rated film to open above $100 million, and it was the first R-rated film to open above $150 million domestically. So as expected, it really has been treading ground that an R-rated movie has never been able to tread. But it's also an MCU movie that's R-rated, which is something that the franchise had never done before. And I think what you're seeing here is that trading off for that R rating isn't necessarily trading off for box office success if you can get the audience excited about the film. And who were the audience members that went out to see Deadpool this past weekend? Well, it's a little more complicated than with the PG-13 rated film, because you have to look at ticket buyers and not necessarily audience members, because audience members under 17 can't buy their own tickets. So these are the demographics for ticket buyers on Deadpool and Wolverine. First of all, the split between men and women was at 63% to 37%. That is an identical split to what we saw back in 2021 when Spider-Man No Way Home was released. 21% of ticket buyers were 18 to 25. 28% of ticket buyers were between 26 and 35. And the biggest demographic group as far as ticket buyers goes was 36 to 45. So my fellow millennials really showing out this past weekend. A lot of people would say that that's parents buying tickets for their kids, but according to some of the reporting that was out there, only 6% of the audience for Deadpool and Wolverine were teenagers. So the parent factor isn't huge here. I think it just skewed a little bit older. 12% of the ticket buyers were between 44 and 60 years old, and then we had a hip bunch of 55-plus-year-olds. 5% of those ticket buyers were over the age of 55. And if you want to see what the Deadpool effect looks like on the weekend box office overall, this is my road to recovery. The red line is the weekend box office average for 2021 to 2023. The blue line was the weekend box office average for 2015 to 2019. And that dotted black line, which skyrocketed there, as you can see, to over $250 million, is the weekend box office total for this past weekend. Now, keep in mind, this wasn't just Deadpool. We had a couple of other films that were performing well that helped to boost that a little bit, but it was the highest grossing box office weekend of the year by far and exceeded the averages that we have seen for this weekend. Late July is not typically where you're putting out a big blockbuster like this for the first weekend. The highest performing film for that 2021 to 2023 window was the second weekend of Barbie. The highest performing film for the 2015 to 2019 window was the second weekend of The Lion King back in 2019. So a nice spike to see on that chart when we saw it below the averages for so many weeks. So yeah, Deadpool and Wolverine, a massive hit, and yet another chapter in this epic turnaround that we've seen this summer at the box office. It really has been a summer where people, including myself, thought that audience members had lost all passion for going to the movies. It turns out they'll turn up for the movies. It's just that they didn't really want to see a lot of the movies that came out, particularly in May. I think that any amount of money that goes into the box office is a good amount of money. And now we have kind of the unprecedented idea of what our weekend 2 holds going to look like for Deadpool and Wolverine. What does an R-rated film that was that big in weekend number 1 look like in weekend number 2? We've seen drops for movies that open at this level anywhere from 70% for things like Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 to much, much lower for films that have great word of mouth. So that will be the story to track going into next weekend. But as far as this weekend, no asterisks on this movie. It would have been a success, quite frankly, if it had been a PG-13 MCU film, made even more impressive by the fact that it did what it did with that R rating. 3 films dropped out of the top 10 this past weekend. Maxine is out after 3 weeks. Bad News, a film from India, is out after 1 week, so bad news for bad news. And in its second appearance, The Bike Riders is out of the top 10 after 1 week. I did get some confirmation from a lot of commenters that The Bike Riders was indeed attached to twisters at several drive-ins, which explains why it popped back up into the top 10 last weekend. As far as the biggest theater count changes of the weekend, Fly Me to the Moon lost about 2/3 of its theaters. It lost 2,042 theaters. It's now in 1,314, and I anticipate we'll see it lose a big chunk of that next weekend. A Quiet Place Day 1 lost 981 theaters, but it's still in 1,932. Maxine dropped the majority of its theaters. It's now out of wide release. It dropped 852 theaters. It's now in 186 overall. Sound of Hope, the story of Possum Trot, also lost the majority of its theaters. It lost 732 of them. It's now playing in 148 theaters. And Bad Boys Ride or Die lost 710 theaters, but it's still playing in wide release. It remains in 1,006 theaters, which is pretty impressive considering it is in weekend number 8. Since we have arrived at the end of July, I also wanted to take a quick look at the box office market share for the year so far. So if you take all the tickets sold since January 1st, what percentage has each studio captured of those ticket sales? First of all, this is what we were looking like at the end of June as Inside Out 2 began its incredible run. Warner Brothers was the overall market share leader at 20.4%. Disney was close behind at 19.93%. Universal and Sony were both splitting about 15%, and Paramount was pretty much a non-factor at 9.3%. Well, let's see what things look like a month later. And you can see that Disney has picked up about 3% 4%. It's up to 23% market share for the year. Keep in mind that they largely sat out the first 3 or 4 months this year. It takes the lead over from Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers lost about 4% market share. It now sits at 16%. The big gainer was actually Universal, which had hits with Twisters, which it's handling here domestically, as well as Despicable Me 4. Universal picked up 6% market share. It's now pretty close behind Disney for the overall lead this year at 21.45%. Sony lost approximately 3% market share. It's now sitting right below 13%. Paramount still a non-factor at 8.96%. Amazon and Lionsgate both have market shares around the 3% range, and then all other studios, which would be all non-major studios that you don't see listed here, account for about 10% of the box office business so far this year. So let's continue to break down Deadpool and Wolverine's opening weekend by looking outside the domestic marketplace to the international marketplace, all of the countries that aren't US and Canada. First of all, these were the top 5 films internationally for this past weekend. Deadpool and Wolverine brings in $233.3 million from all markets outside of the US and Canada for an easy number 1. In second place was the Chinese film Successor at $48.9 million, followed by Despicable Me 4 at $37.6 million, Inside Out 2 at $22.6 million, and then The Travelers in fifth place at $12.3 million. This is a film from China about a young man who learns to fight off zombies and do martial arts while visiting his grandfather's grave. It was based on the Chinese graphic novel The Outcast. It does not, however, make the overall top 5, which is when you combine the international and the domestic box office numbers. Deadpool and Wolverine is, of course, number 1. It has a worldwide debut weekend of $438.3 million, so close to $500 million in box office revenue in its first weekend. In second place was Despicable Me 4. It dropped 31.6% from the previous weekend for a $51.8 million worldwide total. Then we have Successor, which drops 42.6% with $48.9 million in third place. Twisters dropped 56.9%. Again, this movie is driven largely by the domestic market. It was at $46.4 million. And Inside Out 2 hangs around the top 5. It dropped 34.3% and added another $30.9 million to its worldwide total. So let's see what Deadpool did as far as the world stage. First of all, it was the top Hollywood debut of the year, and not even close. $438.3 million, easily above the debut of Inside Out 2 back in June at $295 million. So Deadpool and Wolverine clears that by over $100 million. Godzilla Kong: The New Empire is in third place. Dune Part 2 is in fourth, and Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is in fifth. As far as overall weekends, so whether it's the opening weekend or not for 2024 worldwide, Deadpool and Wolverine captures the top spot there at number 1. I imagine it'll be in one of these spots next weekend as well. The first week of Inside Out 2 is in second place at $294.2 million, but keep in mind it was a slower rollout because the third weekend of Inside Out 2 is in third place at $265.6 million. Then we have the opening weekend of Godzilla Kong: The New Empire at $194 million and Dune Part 2 at $182.5 million. When we look at the franchise tracker for X-Men by worldwide gross, Deadpool and Wolverine is already number 7, so it has passed the final worldwide gross of 7 other X-Men movies: the Wolverine, X2, X-Men United, X-Men Origins Wolverine, X-Men First Class, 2000's X-Men, Dark Phoenix, and the New Mutants, and it will soon pass X-Men The Last Stand. It'll break into that $500 million club, and again, it should be able to capture this number 1 spot from Deadpool 2 pretty easily. Deadpool 2 is sitting at $786.3 million. Looking at the MCU by worldwide gross, Deadpool and Wolverine has passed the worldwide final box office totals of 6 MCU films: Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, Eternals, Black Widow, Captain America the First Avenger, The Incredible Hulk, and The Marvels. It's sitting right behind Thor and Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which it will pass pretty soon. Then it'll crack that $500 million mark and continue to move up the list. The big question is, will it become the 11th Marvel film to crack the $1 billion mark worldwide? Looking at the word of mouth, I think it seems very likely, but the R rating is a bit of a wild card here. So we'll have to see how it does in these next few weeks. Again, Inside Out 2 really kind of doing things in the shadows here because of the spotlight on Deadpool and Wolverine. It is now the highest grossing animated film of all time, not inclusive of The Lion King, which I've talked about many times before. It has passed Frozen 2 at $1.5 billion to become the highest grossing animated film of all time worldwide. And it's only about $10 million away from knocking out The Avengers as the 10th highest grossing movie of all time worldwide, and we'll look at those numbers next week. So Inside Out 2 continuing to break its own records as Deadpool and Wolverine takes the main stage. We've got so much more to talk about, but before we do, I want to thank the sponsor for this week's show. This video is sponsored by Helix Sleep. The fireworks may be over, but their 4th of July sale is running now, and it's a great time to upgrade your mattress. You can get 30% off an Elite or Luxe mattress, plus 2 free pillows, or take advantage of 25% off site-wide, and you can check out all the details on the Helix website. But first, let me tell you about my experience. I've had my new Helix mattress for a couple of weeks now, and I've slept great. It's soft, it's comfortable, and I was able to use Helix's site to pick the perfect mattress for how I like to sleep and have it shipped directly to me. Sleep is kind of a big deal for me. I don't always get a lot of it, and when I can get it, I want it to be deep and restful, and that's not a problem with Helix. Helix Sleep makes premium mattresses and bedding that are customized to fit your needs. The Helix lineup offers 20 unique mattresses, including their award-winning Luxe and Ultra Premium Elite collections, the Helix Plus, a mattress designed for big and tall sleepers, and the Helix Kids mattress, designed for growing bodies and endorsed by child sleep and medical experts. Everybody's different, and Helix knows that, so they made a sleep quiz that matches your unique body type and sleep preference to the perfect mattress for you. I'm a side sleeper who likes a nice soft mattress, and based on my results, Helix matched me with a Sunset Luxe mattress, and it was the perfect choice. I couldn't have picked a better one if I'd gone to the store and awkwardly laid down on one myself. I've wanted to replace this mattress for a long time, and I'm really glad that I didn't upgrade until I gave Helix a try, because what I love most is that I fall asleep fast, and it's way more comfortable than the mattress I replaced. It's got that perfect level of softness that helps me fall asleep so quick. And if you live in the US, it costs absolutely nothing to have it shipped to your house. The mattress comes rolled up in a box and is super easy to set up yourself. I had it unpacked and on the bed in under 10 minutes. And if you're worried about buying something that you haven't tried, Helix has a 100-night sleep trial, so you get more than 3 months to make sure that you have the mattress that's right for you. Plus, Helix mattresses have a 10-year warranty, and they even offer financing options and flexible payment plans, so a great night's sleep is never far away. I love my Helix mattress, and I think that you will too. If you're looking for a new bed, check out Helix Sleep. Their 4th of July sale is running now. It's the perfect time to upgrade your sleep with 30% off an Elite or Luxe mattress plus 2 free pillows, or take 25% off site-wide. Click the link below or go to helixsleep.com/Dan Murrell to find out more about this limited time offer. All right, let's return to the domestic scene and look at some of the specialty charts for this past weekend. First of all, these are the top per theater averages of the weekend. Deadpool and Wolverine right now has a per theater average of $48,694 per theater in each of its 4,210 theaters. That number could go up, perhaps approaching $50,000 per theater, depending on what the final number is. I'll update this next week if I need to. Poor Dee, which is a great movie that played the Sundance Film Festival, actually one of my favorite movies of the year so far. Usually a $40,000 per theater average would easily have gotten at the number 1 spot, but it just so happened to open the same week as Deadpool and Wolverine. But Dee comes in with an impressive second with $40,000 per theater in each of the 5 theaters in which it was playing. Sing Sing comes in third, bringing in $11,611 in each of its 4 theaters. Twisters comes in fourth, bringing in $8,465 in each of its 4,170 theaters. And what's going on here? Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is in 5th place. It brought in $5,150 in each of its 40 theaters, and I highly suspect that this happened because Disney paired Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes with Deadpool and Wolverine at a select number of drive-in theaters. This is what studios do. It's a way for them to boost the box office of particular movies late in their run, and I think that that is why you see Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes on this list, where it was nowhere near this list in the previous weeks. Looking at the highest per theater averages of the year, Kinds of Kindness is still an easy number 1 with its $75,000 per theater average back in June, playing in 5 theaters. But Deadpool and Wolverine has the second best per theater average of the year at $48,694 as of right now in 4,210 theaters. Then we have The Taste of Things, which brought in $43,350 in 3 theaters. But DD also posts a top 5 per theater average for the year at $40,000 in 5 theaters. That bumps Inside Out 2 down to 5th place. It brought in $34,730 per theater in each of its 4,440 theaters. Looking at the top films in limited release, this is, as I define it, playing in 1,000 theaters or fewer. At number 1 was Ryan, which was in only 133 theaters, but brought in $453,000. In second place was Bad News. I don't have a theater count for it in its second weekend, but it brought in $253,912. DD's in third place. It brought in $200,000, followed by Widow Clicquot in 83 theaters. It brought in $113,000. And then Oddity, which lost the bulk of its theaters in weekend number 2. It played in just 229 theaters, but still brought in just over $100,000. All right, let's take a look at the new summer box office chart, and there were some shakeups this past week. Inside Out 2 is, of course, still the number 1 movie of the summer, followed by Despicable Me 4, which is up to $290.9 million. But Deadpool and Wolverine enters the chart at number 3. It will soon be number 2, behind Inside Out 2. Bad Boys Ride or Die drops down 1 spot to number 4. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes drops down 1 spot to number 5. Twisters rises up 3 spots. It's now the 6th highest grossing film of the summer. A Quiet Place Day 1 drops 2 spots to number 7. If drops 2 spots to number 8. The Fall Guy drops 2 spots to number 9. And the Garfield movie drops 2 spots down to number 10. Now, if no other movie breaks $91.7 million this summer, this will be your final box office top 10. But I think that we're going to have 1 or 2 movies that are still going to make this list. I don't think this is the final list. Out of the summer top 10 this weekend, with the entrance of Deadpool and Wolverine, is Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, which has really died a slow death on this chart. And that officially eliminates, as we look at my predictions for the 2024 summer box office, my first top 10 pick. I picked Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, to be the 6th highest grossing film of the summer. It will not make the top 10, and I hate to lose a movie that's listed that far up, but honestly, when you look at the rest of this chart, I'm feeling okay about my picks. I picked Despicable Me 4, Deadpool and Wolverine, and Inside Out 2 as the top 3 movies of the summer. Inside Out 2 is going to be number 1, but Deadpool and Wolverine, I think you can safely say, will be number 2. So the top 3 I got right, just in the wrong order. Twisters was my pick for number 4, and I think it's got a good shot at being either number 4 or very close to that spot. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, I picked to be the 5th highest grossing movie of the summer. Right now, that's where it is. Of course, Furiosa Mad Max Saga was a wasted pick there. I picked A Quiet Place Day 1 to be the 7th highest grossing film of the summer. That's where it currently sits. The Garfield movie, I picked at number 8. I think it's likely that that one is going to drop out. Bad Boys Ride or Die, I picked at number 9. That was obviously a low pick. It's currently sitting at number 4. And then we'll see what happens with Alien Romulus, which opens on August 16th. But, you know, I've certainly done a lot worse as far as my summer box office picks, so I'm not feeling too bad about it so far. Also, some shakeups on the 2024 annual domestic box office. Inside Out 2 is the highest grossing film of the year. Despicable Me 4 is now also the 2nd highest grossing year of 2024, in addition to being number 2 for the summer. Dune Part 2 drops down 1 spot to number 3. It will soon drop down to number 4 because Deadpool and Wolverine enters the chart at number 4 at $205 million. That bumps Godzilla Kong the New Empire down to 5th place, Kung Fu Panda down to 6th, Bad Boys Ride or Die down to 7th, and Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes down to 8th. Twisters enters the overall 2024 box office chart at number 9. A Quiet Place Day 1 drops down 2 spots to number 10. And Ghostbusters Frozen Empire and If are now off of the highest grossing films of 2024 domestically. Looking at the 2024 worldwide box office chart, Deadpool and Wolverine enters the chart at number 8 at $438.3 million. And it will begin climbing this chart very quickly. I could see it as high as number 4 by the time we hit next week's show. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes drops down to number 9. Bad Boys Ride or Die drops down to number 10. And Article 20 from China drops off of the overall top 10 for 2024 worldwide. And that top 5 is going to get a shakeup pretty soon. Looking at the highest grossing films for the last 365 days, so that's from July 29th of last year to July 29th of this year, really nothing much changes from last week. Despicable Me 4 is now the 3rd highest grossing film of the last year, with Wonka being moved down to number 4. And then we have Deadpool and Wolverine, which enters the chart at number 10 and knocks Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom off the chart again after just 1 week. So sorry, Aquaman, we have a new superhero movie in town. Before we go, as we often do, I want to take a look at a weekend in box office history, and we're going back to July 26th through the 28th, 2013. This may seem like an odd choice, but I made it for a very specific reason. Number one, of course, is because it saw the opening weekend of The Wolverine. Of course, Wolverine now back on top with Deadpool. At $53.1 million, its domestic total would end up at $132.5 million. In second place that weekend was The Conjuring, which dropped 46.9% in weekend number 2 and made $22.2 million. Its domestic total would end up at $137.4 million. That was a surprise hit back in the summer of 2013. Despicable Me 2, in its fourth weekend of release, was in third place. It dropped 34.1% for a $16.4 million total. Its final domestic was at $368 million. And at number 4 was the other reason that I picked this weekend, because it was the animated film Turbo, which dropped 35.5% for a $13.7 million weekend total. Turbo stars the voice of Ryan Reynolds as the snail, the hero snail of the film. So strangely, 11 years ago this weekend, Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman shared the top 5 with 2 different films, very different in many ways. And here we are now in 2024, they share the number 1 spot with Deadpool and Wolverine. It's weird how things work out like that sometimes. I wonder if you'd gone back 11 years and asked Ryan Reynolds as he was voicing a snail, whether he thought that he would be teaming up with Hugh Jackman as Wolverine for the number 1 opening film of the year, if he would have believed you. Maybe so. He seems like a pretty confident guy. In fifth place was Grown Ups 2, which dropped 41.6% in its third weekend for an $11.6 million weekend total. Its final domestic was at $133.6 million. But what would those numbers look like in today's dollars? Well, that's why we have our handy little adjusted for inflation button. And when we hit that button, we see that the Wolverine debuted at number 1 with an adjusted total of $71.6 million on its way to $178.7 million adjusted domestic total. The Conjuring was in second place with an adjusted weekend of $29.9 million and an adjusted final of $185.3 million. Then we have Despicable Me 2 at $22.1 million. Its final total, when you adjust for inflation, is close to $500 million. It was a very popular film. Turbo had a weekend adjusted total of $18.5 million and ends up over $100 million when you adjust for inflation at $111.9 million. And then Grown Ups 2 has an adjusted weekend total of $15.6 million and a final domestic adjusted number of $180.2 million. So those are all the box office charts, but we have even more to do because if you remember, I've now reincorporated streaming charts back into the show. So we have all those great Deadpool charts. Let's also look at what has been number 1 on these various streaming services, and we will start with the latest numbers out of Netflix. This covers the week of July 15th through July 21st, and the most watched program on Netflix globally that week was the season 6 premiere of Cobra Kai, which brought in 18.48 million views. This is a very popular Netflix series that was brought over from YouTube when YouTube was making original content. Remember that? So we will see how Cobra Kai season 6 does in the weeks ahead. Of course, now that Netflix does this multi-part season thing, we'll see it fluctuate up and down the charts. In second place was a Netflix original movie called Find Me Falling, which brought in 14.37 million views. Find Me Falling is a romance starring Harry Connick Jr. as a washed-up rock star getting away from it all in the Mediterranean. In third place is the holdover Netflix original Vanished into the Night with 14 million views. Then we have Trolls Band Together, which brought in 10.3 million views on the platform, followed by one of my favorite titled films of the year, Land of Bad, in fifth place, which brought in 8.74 million views. In sixth place was a Netflix original film called Blame the Game. This is a German movie about a guy who meets his girlfriend's parents for the first time at game night and the chaos that ensues. Then we have Beverly Hills Cop Axel F bringing in another 8.34 million views, followed by Vikings Valhalla Season 3 at 6.4 million views. Maharaja, which is a film from India in the Tamil language about a barber out for revenge after being robbed, it brought in 6.13 million views. And then we have A Family Affair in 10th place with another 5.5 million views. Looking at the most watched Netflix movies of the year so far, this is since January 1st, Damsel remains number 1, followed by Lift, Society of the Snow, Under Paris, and then at number 5, moving up the chart from last week, is A Family Affair, which brought in 75.79 million views. Atlas drops down to number 6. Beverly Hills Cop Axel F is at number 7 at 71.62 million views. We'll see if it continues to move up. Mother of the Bride moves down to number 8. Trigger Warning moves down to number 9. And Irish Wish is still the 10th most watched Netflix film of the year at 55.5 million views. And when you look at the overall most watched Netflix programs of 2024, Damsel remains number 1. Bridgerton Season 3 moves up to number 2. It has now cracked that 100 million view mark, so congratulations to you, Bridgerton Season 3. Society of the Snow moves down to 3rd place. Lift moves down to number 4. Fool Me Once is at number 5. Under Paris is at number 6. Baby Reindeer is at number 7. A Family Affair moves up to the 8th most watched Netflix program of the year, followed by Atlas at number 9, which drops down 1 spot, and Beverly Hills Cop Axel F, which enters the top 10 most watched programs of the year at 71.62 million views. That drops Mother of the Bride, the Netflix original film, out of the overall top 10. And with the latest Bridgerton Season 3 numbers, it also moves into the top 10 most viewed Netflix series since they began reporting numbers back in June of 2021. It's now at number 10, right behind Money Heist Part 4. It knocks Money Heist Part 5 out of the overall top 10. The Queen's Gambit is at number 8. Lupin Part 1 is at number 7. Dahmer Monster is at number 6. Bridgerton Season 2 is at number 5. Bridgerton Season 1 is at number 4. Stranger Things 4 is at number 3. Wednesday Season 1 is at number 2, and Squid Game Season 1 is still the champion, and I think will be for quite some time. And when we look at the top 10 most viewed Netflix programs, overall, movie or series, since they started reporting numbers, crunching the latest numbers for Bridgerton Season 1, that moves it now into the overall top 10, dropping The Gray Man out of the overall top 10. It comes in right behind Stranger Things 4. Then we have several Netflix original movies, Leave the World Behind, Bird Box, The Adam Project, Extraction, and Don't Look Up. Red Notice is at number 3. And then the most watched Netflix programs since 2021 are headlined by 2 series, Squid Game Season 1 and Wednesday Season 1. Let's move now to the Nielsen ratings. Now, this covers the US only, and these numbers are delayed by about a month. This covers the week of June 24th through the 30th, which saw the debut of A Family Affair on Netflix. It brought in 15 million hours watched. That's how Nielsen judges things, not by views, but by hours watched. Trigger Warning is down in 2nd place, followed by Inside Out, which continues to see a surge on Disney Plus following the release of Inside Out 2. The Flash made its debut on Netflix and comes in at number 4 at 4.2 million hours watched, followed by Minions, seeing a boost from Despicable Me 4 at 3.7 million hours watched. Moana's at number 6. Oppenheimer's at number 7 as it transitioned over to Prime Video and has seen a surge in viewership. The Super Mario Bros. Movie returns to the chart at number 8. Kung Fu Panda hits the chart at number 9 with its debut on Peacock, the rare Peacock sighting here on this chart. And then Home rounds out the top 10 with 3.1 million hours watched. Looking at the most watched streaming movies of the year in the US, according to Nielsen through June 30th, really only one change, which is that surge in viewership for Oppenheimer has now made it the 10th most watched movie of the year. It drops 2021's Dune out of the top 10. The rest of the top 10 remains the same, and I think that we're going to see some of these Netflix films cracking this chart pretty soon. Looking at the most watched streaming shows for June 24th through the 30th, at number 1 is Your Honor, which has been a huge licensed hit to Netflix. This was originally a Showtime show. It had 26.3 million hours watched. Overall, the most watched show of the week. Dexter debuted on Netflix. This is a full circle thing. The first time I saw Dexter, it was on Netflix, and then it got pulled off because everybody went to its own streaming service. But now Dexter is back on Netflix, 24.7 million hours watched. This was also the week that saw the debut of The Bear Season 3, and because it dropped the entire season, it had enough hours watched to be in that third spot at 20.5 million hours. The Boys on Amazon, as it continued to unroll, its latest season is at number 4 at 19.6 million hours watched, followed by Bridgerton at number 5, Bluey at number 6, House of the Dragon at number 7, keeping in mind that's just the people that watched on Max. That doesn't count people that watched through HBO on cable. Grey's Anatomy's at number 8, Family Guy's at number 9, and Criminal Minds rounds out the top 10. Looking at the top 20 shows as far as watch time per available episode, at number 1 was Netflix's Supercell, which brought in 1.53 million hours watched per episode for each of its 6 episodes. Then we had the Netflix series Worst Roommate Ever with 1.4 million hours watched per episode for each of its 9 episodes, followed by House of the Dragon, which brought in 1.34 million hours watched per episode. America's Sweethearts, the docuseries following the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders, comes in 4th at 1.32 million hours watched per episode. And then Your Honor comes in 5th at 1.317 million hours watched for each of its 20 episodes. Bridgerton comes in 6th place, followed by The Bear, putting up 733,000 hours watched per episode. The Boys comes in 8th at 677,000 hours watched per episode. Perfect Match is at 9th. Dexter is in 10th. And for a second consecutive week, we have no viewership numbers for Star Wars The Acolyte because it was not among the top 10 most watched original shows of the week. We also have one quick update on the 2024 most watched library streaming series chart. So these are non-original programming that are streaming on the various different services. Your Honor is now the 10th most watched library streaming series of the year, which drops out The Resident. Your Honor is now at 124.8 million hours watched. Bob's Burgers is at 9. The Big Bang Theory is at 8. Suits is at 7. Criminal Minds is at number 6. Family Guy is at number 5. Young Sheldon drops down to number 4. NCIS, which is on this list all the time, moves back up to number 3. Grey's Anatomy is in 2nd place, and Bluey has cracked the 500 million hours watched mark for the year. It's at an easy number 1. And that finally does it for Charts with Dan this week. We had a lot of information to go over. I hope you found it interesting. Looking at the week ahead, some of the things you'll see in streaming and in theaters include the concert film Blackpink World Tour, Born in Pink. It's a concert film featuring the South Korean girl group's world tour, and it will start select theatrical showings on Wednesday, so check your show times if you want to see that in theaters. On Thursday on Amazon Prime is the debut of the new animated series Batman Caped Crusader from some of the creative team behind Batman the Animated Series. I've seen a couple of episodes of this. I didn't have time to put together a full review ahead of release. I have mixed feelings about it, but overall I think it definitely captures the vibe of the animated series, and I want to get deeper into the show because I only got a couple episodes in. But enough for me to say it's promising, and I'm looking forward to seeing more. If you really don't have much to do this weekend, you can check out the director's cuts of Rebel Moon Part 1 and Part 2 on Netflix. Does it somehow pull everything together, as seems to always be the case with Zack Snyder's movies? Sometimes that's been true, sometimes it hasn't been true. But if you saw Rebel Moon Parts 1 and 2 and said, I wish those movies were much longer, well, your wish comes true this weekend. Also this Friday on Netflix is Saving Bikini Bottom, the Sandy Cheeks movie. Why this is a SpongeBob SquarePants spinoff movie that's debuting on Netflix and not Paramount Plus, I have no idea, but you know, that's Paramount Plus for you. Also opening this Friday in select theaters is a film called The Instigators, starring Matt Damon and Casey Affleck as criminals on the run. It's directed by Doug Liman, but it is probably only going to be in a small number of theaters. It will make its national debut on Apple TV Plus next Friday. Also this Friday in select theaters is one of my favorite films out of Sundance, Kneecap, which is a comedy about an Irish hip-hop band starring the band themselves. I think it's a very funny film. And the two major theatrical offerings this upcoming weekend are Harold and the Purple Crayon, starring Zachary Levi as Harold. It's I guess a reimagining of the book as I remember reading it when I was a kid. And then, of course, M. Night Shyamalan's Trap, starring Josh Hartnett. M. Night Shyamalan's films are always a roll of the dice between, hey, that was pretty good, or that was the craziest thing I've ever seen. I will have my review of that film up later this week. And thank you so much for joining me on what I suspect was a supersized edition of Charts with Dan. Be sure to stay tuned right here for updates on Deadpool and Wolverine, as well as movie reviews, box office, and more. Thanks to Helix Sleep, my sponsor for the show. Be sure to check out more about them in the description and the comments below. And most of all, thank you for watching. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.